Hey everyone, welcome to the March 17th, 2025 meeting of the West Boylston Zoning Board of Appeals. Before we get going, can I just confirm with folks online that they're able to hear me okay? Can I got a thumbs up, couple thumbs up, perfect, thank you very much.
Are you,
All right,
maybe it's on, are you on Zoom?
Yes, sir.
That's why
Maybe
we are,
that's the active.
that's why we are
I
getting,
just turned it off, so it should be okay.
oh, it should be okay.
there we go,
I apologize. I said
I know,
join
no,
the
no,
sound
no,
and
no,
it came on.
no need to apologize.
not a problem.
You guys are loud.
No, echo.
Yeah, a little bit of an echo. It's better than being too soft anyways. All right, so we do have a first item here, continued public hearing to act upon the petition of Branded Realty Group 3 LLC for a comprehensive permit for the site located at 235, 245, and 249 West Boylston Street and 27 Pierce Street. So we are continuing the public hearing now since the last public session. We have, I've actually got a few things here that I want to try and get accomplished this evening. I think probably, certainly one of the most important of which is I know since we met last, that we've since received a report from the petitioner, which was their response to the original engineering report from VHB. And actually earlier today, we've now just received sort of a response to your response. So now we've got sort of two reports that we can update with everyone on the board and members of the public with tonight. So that's great. I think that's top on the agenda list for tonight. What I'd also like to do, get to sort of as quickly as we can, is I know that I noticed that we do have the fire chief in attendance here tonight, so I would like to get to those issues as well as quickly as we can, to respect his time as well. So maybe with that, what I'll do is I'll open it up to the petitioner and give you the opportunity to maybe summarize your report to the board since we last met, and then we can deal with sort of, you know, any more recent changes or additions or comments or whatever you like. But maybe with that, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, I'm Patrick Healy. I'm a civil engineer with Thompson Liston Associates in Boylston, Mass. So we had gone through a number of VHB's comments at the last hearing. We heard the nature of the comments relative to the zoning bylaw, stormwater rules and regs, and general engineering practices. And then there were some comments on transportation, traffic evaluation. So we've gone through point by point. We had an online meeting with the review engineers. We've sort of agreed on how we would address various issues. We've gone through and made a number of plan revisions to address those comments. And I think we're getting pretty close to where we need to be. I would like to point out that we had requested waivers of several parts of the zoning bylaw, which are specific to the planning board's jurisdiction for site plan review, site plan, review standards, design standards. And I just wanted to point that out because to a number of these comments, we reminded you of our waiver request. Although we're addressing a number of them, some of them still are going to be required, or can only be addressed by getting waivers from the zoning bylaw, which we had initially identified and requested.
Yep.
So the changes, in summary, are showing natural features on some of the plans, including soil types, clarifying the surveyed property lines of existing and budding streets and driveways within 200 feet of the site, floodplain information. We made some revisions to parking and loading areas to address some of the comments, including some of the interior walkways and crossings where the reviewers didn't feel it was safe to have such a long crosswalk. We've sort of broken them up to make the crosswalk shorter and put some interim islands to make a safer walking path for pedestrians. We've identified more clearly some of the materials that are being used for construction, We relocated some parking spaces near the building because, as well as getting comments from the review engineer and town departments, the architect has been progressing the design plans as well. So some of the building entrances moved slightly. We had to align our, accessible routes and accessible parking spaces to comport with those. And then there were a number of comments on the stormwater report that we had prepared in our stormwater management system. Since we met last month, there was some additional subsurface investigations done on the site by the geotechnical professionals. So we have some additional information about the depth to groundwater, and I think we can all agree that the findings are that the groundwater depth is significantly deep. So none of the things that we're proposing near the surface for our stormwater management will have a direct impact on either being too close to the groundwater or creating groundwater mounding. So we've included a table of sort of a summary of that subsurface information. Then there were a number of technical revisions that we made about defining how the roof drains connect to the system, what some of the components of the stormwater system were, and how we labeled them on the plan. So we added a number of labels. We made some amendments to the stormwater report, so the labels you see in one place now match. So for example, in one of the underground ponds, we have an overflow device that's now pointed out on the plan view. So there's no question about, what are we trying to model. There was some confusion over what some of those structures were on the site. For example, we have some catch basins that aren't really collecting anything, but we're using them as overflows from our subsurface detention basins, so that when those fill up to a certain level, the catch basins overflow and go out toward the pattern that the runoff will follow down toward Pierce Street and down toward Gatesbrook.
Oh, excuse me. Could I ask Mr. Healy to speak, can you speak up a little bit more?
I can hear myself, so I'm afraid to speak up, sorry. I'll try moving the mic closer, how's that?
Thank you.
Okay. And then we have some comments to respond to some general engineering comments on the plans. We provided more detail about the truck moving analysis that we did, the swept path analysis, if you will. We clarified that we do in fact need an NPDES permit, but that's not something we'll apply for until we have all of our local approvals. So this is coverage under the US EPA stormwater construction period permitting. So essentially, we have to get all of our local and state permits in place, and then we file for that approximately a week before construction begins. So we need to have our schedule, construction schedule, sequence, all the permits in place, and then with the contractor as the site operator will apply for that coverage. We made some changes to the location for the EV-ready parking spaces, and I think maybe we still have some fine-tuning to do on that, but I just want to point out that we are meeting the requirement under the energy code to have 20% of the spaces be EV-ready, and maybe we can move a couple around to make them, more compatible with the ADA regulations. But a number of those spaces are adjacent to, and the wheelchair accessible spaces are both EV ready. There was a question about the zoning bylaw and how it relates to retaining walls. So I guess our answer to that is our retaining walls are less than 6 feet. We don't believe they're subject to the setbacks that are required. If they are, we'll ask for a waiver from that setback requirement, but that's, I guess, a determination to be made by the building official. We added some guardrails along the retaining walls where the site entrance drive comes in. We have one parking lot that sits above the driveway and one below. Those walls will now have guardrails to not only prevent the cars from driving over, but prevent the bumpers from overhanging into the driving lanes and pedestrian sidewalks. So I guess one of the questions that was raised was about the sewer capacity and how we were proposing to connect to sewers, whether there's new connections or we'd like to use the existing connections that go out to Route 12 if possible. So I recently received the record information for those pipes. We're still evaluating exactly how those connections will be made. And then there are questions about the grease traps. We were providing the grease traps as sort of placeholder if they should be able to get a restaurant or a fast food or, convenience type food service as one of their tenants. There's a provision for a grease trap. They don't have tenants lined up at this point in time, but if there's any food service in the building, each building needs a grease trap. So we made those provisions. Those could possibly be amended or moved closer to those if that tenant materializes in the future. We want to make sure from the outset that the sewer system's designed that when those connections are made, there's a place for those connections. So if you're familiar with the rules, this is under the state plumbing code. Any food service that has a 3-bay sink is required to have an underground grease trap. So we have to have those in place. So we wanted to make sure places on the site where those work horizontally and vertically and slopes work out and all that. We did make some adjustments to the parking space and aisle layouts to eliminate some dead ends that were identified by the review engineer. We can ask them after, but I think the changes that we made will satisfy your concerns about sort of people being trapped at the end of a parking lot. If all the spaces are filled, they have to back up the full aisle length. Or if you were in that last space at the end of the aisle, there wasn't enough turning space to come out. I think we've corrected those to improve that situation. There was a question about the sidewalk along Route 12. We proposed sidewalks along Route 12. We need to apply for a permit from Mass DOT. This is a requirement, we know. We're expected to provide pedestrian accommodations. But our site sort of surrounds this other small site that's owned by others. So we've aligned our sidewalks in such a way that the sidewalk could be extended across that site, or a crosswalk could be painted across their site in the future. Currently, we don't have permission to work on that site. And honestly, that business owner is a competitor for our clients. So, it may be a difficult negotiation to hold, to have permission to work on their particular frontage.
Right, if I could comment on that, Robert Bronca, Manager Brandon Realty Group 3. We did try to acquire that site early in the process, and it was clear that it was not a transaction that was going to happen. So we don't expect any cooperation to that extent. And what I will say is that there are no sidewalks now, and there are really no organized entrances and exits for vehicles versus pedestrians.
Yeah.
What we are doing is a massive improvement to what's there now. Despite our being unable to deal with that neighbor site, it's still going to be a better site. They could be encouraged to improve their site to connect to ours, and we certainly would work with them. But like I said, what we are proposing is much safer and much better than what's there now and what has historically been there.
And then I think the last question I should bring your attention to is the question about whether MEPA applies to the project. So if you know about this, MEPA is an oversight state agency under the Secretary of the Environment and Energy that looks at major developments and determines whether the mitigation is proper, whether the state agencies that are issuing permits are considering all of the factors that go into it. So there are certain thresholds. If your project, for example, constructs 5 acres of impervious area or something like that, or proposes, a shopping mall with 15,000 vehicle trips, you're subject to this review. But there are some smaller thresholds to catch other projects that might trigger a state permit but not meet one of these larger thresholds. So we have evaluated that, and I sort of provide a summary in my response letter. So there are 3 potential thresholds that could capture a project like this. One would be if there are 3,000 or more trips to a single location. We don't trip that threshold. We have about 1,600 vehicle trips per day in our projections. The second would be if there are 2,000 vehicle trips, that would trigger what's called an environmental notification form. We don't trip that threshold. And then there's this sort of combined threshold, so if we have 1,000 or more vehicle trips per day and more than 150 new parking spaces, then that would trip a threshold for an environmental notification form. But in this case, looking at the amount of parking that's on the site currently, our increase in parking is not over 150. So even though we have 1,600 vehicle trips per day, we're not meeting the parking threshold, and you have to meet both of those to meet that particular transportation threshold. So the only state agencies we know we're dealing with are DCR, as we had talked about at the last meeting, and Mass DOT for our access permit. And then
In-housing and livable communities, which were approved.
that's part of this process. And then the transportation engineer replied to several of the reviewers' comments with site circulation, parking, crash numbers, traffic volumes, and I think we've satisfied all of the requests that were made, and Lisa Wan is online. If there are any specific questions, we can answer.
Thank you,
You're welcome.
thank you. Any questions from the board?
Have you approached Mass DOT about the sidewalk? About putting the sidewalk in?
No, sir, not at this time. So
Not at
we
this
have to have our local permits in place before we start the Mass DOT process.
And you don't, and because there's already spaces there for cars to enter and exit, you don't need to get anything from them to do that, right?
Oh, yes.
Curb cuts.
As I said, we need an
Curb cuts,
access
You need to get
permit.
them from them?
Yes,
Oh, really? Even though there's already curb cuts there?
correct. Anytime you change the use of the curb cut to a
Okay.
different commercial use, or move or alter the curb cut,
Okay,
you're required to go through Mass DOT for permitting.
okay. Did not know that.
Other questions from the board? Okay, thank you. I don't have any particular questions. I mean, I think that summarizes well a lot of the issues that were discussed previously. So maybe at this point, what I'll do is ask Wayne, VHB, to give your sort of latest and greatest on where we stand currently.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Wayne Amico from VHB. Accompanying me is Pat Dunford, also from VHB. Thank you for having us here. So, I second what Patrick said. We did meet online and went through all his responses. Sorry about the lateness of our letters today, but given time frame and so forth, I just couldn't get it any sooner. A couple of things. So, we formatted both of our response letters at the board's desire. If you wanted to close this hearing tonight, there's several conditions you could impose, and we can go through that if you'd like to, okay? Or if you prefer, there's a handful of issues, as Patrick was noting, that should probably be addressed, and then you could continue the hearing one time, and I'm sure those things would be resolved.
Yep.
Either way, we could go through those. If you'd like me to go through them, I'd be glad to. I would recommend maybe letting the fire chief go first, because this could take a little while to go through all the comments, if
Okay.
that's amenable to the board.
Okay. Any,
Yeah, I didn't have time to read through it.
yeah,
so-
you may, I confess.
Yeah.
Patrick did a good job highlighting everything, but if you'd like to close tonight, you probably could. We can just go through and go list everything and tell you, this needs to be a condition, this needs to be a
Yeah.
condition, et cetera.
Yeah, just speaking for my current expectation, I don't expect that we're gonna close tonight. So,
Okay. Fair enough.
I don't think that's a shock to anybody, given sort of where we are in the process for the comprehensive permit. But in any event, I sort of second your idea to maybe move over to the fire chief and give him the opportunity to speak, because I know there were questions that were raised at the last hearing. We want to make sure those are addressed, and we want to be respectful of your time, chief. So thank you for coming tonight, and yeah, and feel free to give us your report and any questions that you have.
All right, so, I apologize if there are any more current versions of what I have. So the plans that I have are dated 10/31/24, 10/14 of 22. That's a lighting plan and I believe landscape plan. So just if there are more updated versions that already address some of these issues, I apologize for that. This is what I have to work with. Our primary concern on the fire department and emergency medical side is some of the things that are absent from the plan, that will have to be addressed at some point, is because it's a plan review, not the building review, it doesn't show fire department connections and things like that. So we would want fire hydrants in close proximity to the fire department connections to support, firefighting operations and support sprinkler operations, because obviously they're gonna be required as, part of this type of building. So with that, some of the things that we, look for, this is a very constrained site, and I certainly give you a lot of credit for trying to fit a lot into a limited space and make it regular shape. The challenges for us, we drive big trucks, very, very big trucks. I think the steering radius of our ladder trucks is approximately a 48-foot radius, which makes it very difficult to turn. So particularly coming in like Pierce Street entrance, Pierce Street is fairly wide, not exceptionally wide, but fairly wide. So we can kind of make that turn coming in from either direction with a ladder truck, but then making that right return towards the building one, it looks like it's probably okay, but making that left turn is exceptionally tight. That looks like it's probably in the vicinity of a 24 or so foot radius, which with our long trucks and not having a lot of swinging room in another direction limits our ability to get in there. Some of our challenges, particularly with these types of buildings, are initial operations involve rescue and obviously getting roof and balcony access to get people out of the building as quickly as possible. So we're very limited with that, and I think that's going to be a little bit compounded with some of the size of the parking spots. We look to be about 15, maybe 20 foot in length, but as soon as you put something bigger than an average sedan, for a pickup truck, especially a long bed or extended cab, those are gonna be extending out 22, 24 feet. If there's, curbs and snow embankments in the wintertime, that's gonna push that out, that's really gonna encroach on what's already a fairly tight travel lane with, looks like maybe a 24-foot bi-directional pathway. So it makes it very difficult, and coming around the corners of the buildings, same thing. The landscape plan, the version I have, shows a lot of trees and things in the snow storage area, which is gonna complicate matters for them to be able to get snow effectively out of the drive-in parking areas. Because like the trees might be in the way, the landscaping bushes and stuff might be in the way, and they're kind of limited to where they can put snow. And of course, if that snow starts coming out, encroaching, or interfering with the height to be able to swing, like with our cab over trucks, the rear axle is basically under the driver's seat, so we can effectively swing part of the cab and the bumper as long as it's clear over, which helps us reduce our steering radius. But once there's an obstruction there, a wall, a frozen snow embankment, anything like that, that shortens our berth of swinging a vehicle. So I think some of those radius kind of need to be identified and see if there's ways we can maybe expand some of that, or maybe even push some of the parking spaces out a little bit more into what I assume is going to be grass areas, plant areas, or something like that, just to try to open up those travel paths a little bit. And you're gonna run into the same thing with the trucks. You got big trucks coming in, it's gonna be very cramped. They gotta turn around to try to back up to off-road into some of these spots. That's gonna complicate our operation if we're there for a fire and there's a delivery truck there. We can't avoid that 100%, and that's kind of part of the expectation, but to make these pathways as open as possible to allow for the bigger vehicles to get through, is beneficial for us. And then with the hydrants, like I said, there's gonna be some specific locations required once we have the building plans to see the fire department connections and things like that, and the standby connections. But also as far as us laying in supply lines to supply our apparatus. There's an icon, and I apologize, I can't see where they actually are on the plan identifying existing hydrants, but I don't see anything for any proposed hydrants. So we would ask that we have a provision in there, one, to have a hydrant at each entrance, which would be 3 hydrants, and whether it's relocating
think what the fire chief, you know, I have to agree, because I don't even know if there's any fire hydrants up there to begin with.
Yeah,
And especially on Pierce Street, I don't know if there's anything on Pierce Street, but I would think that, you know, like you said, just in case, you know, it's always good to have one there, you know. And if you're telling us that, you know, you need them, then I would suggest that you put them in there. It's for your safety, you know, if the fire chief is telling you that that's what needs to be there, then I would listen to him.
Comments from the petitioner?
I would like the opportunity to review it with the fire department.
Absolutely.
We've
Sure.
recently
Yeah,
received their
absolutely.
comments, you know,
Yep.
certainly we want the site to be safe as well.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And,
And we're particularly sensitive to, you get a ladder truck in there, then you call for rescues and a rehab unit, and we understand that,
Yeah.
that's something that the firefighters and any first responders
Yep.
need to call in additional resources. So we're cognizant of that, and we'll obviously work with the chief to get him what his department needs. In terms of snow, we're very cognizant of that, because we know that, especially like this winter, when
Yep.
we had extended cold after a snowfall,
Yeah.
the snowbanks don't go away
yeah,
unless you remove them.
Yep.
And one thing we do, our maintenance company has loaders and dump trucks. We cart the snow off-site because I mean, you maybe don't have to do it in March, but certainly you have to do it in January, February. And we do that with all of our properties, so that we understand that, and then people are coming home from work, they need a place to park, they can't have a 20-foot snowbank parked where, you know, their assigned spaces.
okay.
So that, so we try to get on that as quickly as we possibly can.
Okay. So then just one general question from me. So sort of the two big ticket items, as I hear from the fire chief, are obviously the turning radius, the 48-foot turning radius. Philosophically, you don't see an issue with that. That's something you may be able to work around, and I know you'll have conversations with the chief, and then we can maybe talk more about that at the next continued hearing. And then similarly for the addition of, I guess he mentioned maybe at least 3 hydrants, and maybe the opportunity to expand that even more as needed. Again, philosophically, at this point where we stand, you don't necessarily have, you don't see that as a stumbling block at this point? It's something that's not totally unreasonable to you?
No, we'll meet with the
Excellent.
chief, and we know the buildings need sprinklers, we know we need
Okay.
water capacity for
Okay.
that, and that usually ties in with hydrant capacity,
Yep.
because the chief mentioned it.
Okay, all right, excellent.
Through the chair, we did make some amendments to the site plan to improve the truck turning
Yep.
maneuvers, and, you know, the chief obviously hasn't seen that yet, so
Yep.
I'd like to review that with him.
Yeah, absolutely, please do, please do. And then, so that's something that I think we should highlight for, you know, to be revisited the next time that we meet, whether it's in a month or, you know, whenever we decide at the end of tonight, when that will be. But yeah, that's something that I would encourage, you know, the two of you to work with each other on. So I thank you for that cooperation. Excellent.
And then maybe the chief can you can sign off on after your conversation.
Yeah,
Letting-
that's a
letting
great
us know
idea.
that-
Yeah, we'll forward the notes
Yeah.
up once,
That's great.
once we get the opportunity to go through it. And again, it's gonna be a little bit, open-ended currently, because we're looking at site plans with, footprints of buildings, but not identifying fire department connection locations, you know, sprinkler riser locations, stuff like that. So, we wouldn't even know where necessarily to put all hydrants
Yeah.
based on this plan.
Yeah.
But certainly we'll work with them, and as things develop, we'll come to an agreed locations, but
Okay.
that stuff will come.
Okay, yeah, if there's any questions that arise that either myself or the board can help with, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll try to move this along as efficiently as we can.
Mr. Chair, I did point out in my response letter as well, as the chief said, this is a preliminary site plan, so
Yep.
we don't have all those details
Yeah.
about the buildings at this point. Once
Okay.
we know the project's going forward, the architect and the other engineers can be engaged, you know, to come up with those details for the buildings.
Okay, excellent. Other questions or comments from the board at this time?
I think that, as far as I'm concerned, the chief answered all the questions that I was gonna ask, so.
Okay, good. Oh, John, did you have a question? Nothing.
There's not.
Oh, okay, all right, so we're good there. So with that, then, Chief, thank you for coming. Feel free to stay if you want.
We had a fire last night, so I'm on a couple hours of sleep.
Okay, yeah,
If you're okay with it,
I figured.
just assume go home.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for
All right.
coming
Thank you
tonight.
very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Are we gonna discuss anything about the Concom?
You will get to that, yeah. So I think maybe at this point, I'd like to go back to
Sure.
VHB, and we can continue that conversation.
I'd be glad to, Mr. Chairman, thanks. I think, in light of the fact that you're not gonna close tonight, I think the most prudent thing to do in essence of time, let me just highlight a couple issues that probably need a little bit more work, just so the board is aware.
Yep.
From a traffic perspective, and I'll let Pat chime in if he'd like here, some of the graphics just need a little work as far as site distance calculations. There may be some additional work on Pierce Street required to achieve those site distance calcs. Pat, anything further on that one, or?
No, actually, Pat Dunford, transportation engineer with VHB. Lisa and Bill Scully over at KH had provided updated material. And again, in our prior review, we noted most of the study was done, it was fine, professional, well done. Few minor discrepancies, but nothing that affected big picture items. The two remaining bigger picture items, one of them being site distance, I suspect they measured it correctly in the field. My gut feeling is that the graphics that accompanied the package may not have shown it accurately. So what we've requested, and this is relative to sight lines, basically looking for, if you're parked in the driveway, getting set to go out into the roadway, it's the visibility. So I think they're perfectly fine on West Boylston Street. I just suspect it wasn't shown properly in the plans, which is an easy fix. That can be done in the final site plans. On Pierce Street, obviously it's a little bit more of a cramped roadway, also a lower speed roadway. Same sort of what I suspect was a graphic error, but they have about, let's say, 200 plus feet to the north and south of that driveway, roughly. So there's existing trees and brush. I'm not saying they have to clear cut everything, but they have the ability to pull some of that back as needed. I took a look at this a few weeks ago, but with it being winter, obviously you don't get the full feel of the foliage. But they do have the ability to clear that back as needed, and if they can just show that in the final site plan, here's the site triangle looking from the driveway, no obstacles within it, I think they'll be fine with that. It's just documentation.
Thanks, Pat. I know Patrick just received this today. He probably hasn't fully digested it. A lot of it, he'll be tweaking his plans and so forth to address the comments. A couple of things just to note, the bigger issues that we'd be wanting to make sure that was addressed on a final set of plans. Obviously, kind of echoing what the chief said about vehicle tracking, and fire truck access. These are all straightforward, these comments here. Utilities, Patrick's acknowledged that he's been trying to get some record plans. He's recently got those, so I think it's imperative that he kind of figure out what happened with the sewer connections and so forth, that he has the information now, he can look at that. The parking spaces, it's probably worth talking about that for a second. I understand the site layout, Patrick, but I think that, from what we saw, the pedestrians may be kind of pinched between the face of these buildings and the parking, in the parking spaces. We recommended maybe you think about putting some curb stops in or something like that, so that the vehicle, the front of the vehicles don't overhang the edge of the sidewalk and create kind of a constrained area for people to walk. Something to consider. Relative to the drainage, I think you updated and answered all of our questions. We would recommend in your final submittal to the board that you, if there's any updated calcs or anything, you just supply that to the board just so they have a clean copy for their record. About the fire department. We talked about the EV chargers, but I think you have a plan there that you mentioned, so that should be fine. The retaining walls, we kind of basically encourage you to just talk to the building commission to see if you're if you're required to do anything other than what you've explained. So just make sure you provide some documentation to the board on that. I don't know if you've been able to, we understand you've done your due diligence trying to get coordination with the DPW director. If that, if you are able to get any input from DPW, I would just recommend that you just provide that to the board so they have evidence of that. And your comment about the sidewalk on Route 12, fully understandable. You're obviously gonna be subject to DOT permit on that and talk it through. They're not gonna require you to do something on a site that you don't control. That Mass DOT understands that. They may ask you to work with them and try to improve it. I think, you know, some type of striping like you suggest is maybe feasible. There's also parking that clearly is on state highway. So that's something that they'll probably wanna discuss with you guys, and understanding you can't, they can't require you to do something on someone else's property. But that's, just make sure whatever they end up issuing for a permit and requiring gets provided to the board, so they have a record of what they should be expecting. Talked about that, talked about the curb spaces. And the last thing, I guess, just double check that all of your parking spaces meet the dimensional requirements, but I'm sure you'll look at that, you know, in response to this letter. So, nothing huge, Mr. Chairman, just a few things here and there to be cleaned up.
Okay.
Hopefully, you know, we look at this one more time and we should be able to sign off on everything.
Excellent. Questions from the board?
One question, last time, David Female was asking about the trips, weekend, weekdays trips. Do you still have that question?
What?
Weekdays and weekend
Oh,
number of
I
trips.
saw something in here.
Yeah, I believe we discussed that our engineer went out and did vehicle counts on weekends because of that very reason. And VHB is kind enough to do this as well.
Are you happy with those weekend, weekdays trips? Trips generations.
Yeah, I think we had talked about that at the last hearing when I was remote. And I think that was a comment from one of you folks, not us, but all the trip generation estimates I saw were done appropriately and gave reasonable estimates of what the site would generate. So I was comfortable with what their engineer came back with.
Because at first, when they first presented it, they didn't do anything for the weekend. And it's very busy here on the weekends, on Saturdays and Sundays. And I just didn't understand why you would just do Monday through Friday and not all 7 days, you know, especially when Saturdays and Sundays are busy.
Because it looks bad for them.
So that's just.
If I could offer, again, we did review this, for a residential-based property, it's not uncommon to only look at weekday conditions, because that's usually the busiest for residential. Regardless, they were good enough to have their engineers go out and supplement that with weekend analysis for Saturday, which is common for retail. So the estimates they had were fine, in my opinion.
That answered my question.
Okay, thank
Can
you.
I just ask,
Go ahead.
how many total parking spaces are there between the two commercial buildings and the apartment building? How many total I'm sorry, I thought maybe you had it on.
I believe it's 188, but I'll let them confirm as there may be changes.
Through the chair, that's correct. That's the revised plan now has 188 parking spaces.
Okay.
We initially had 195, but we had to take some away to open up some of these dead ends and improve the vehicle turning. This is still well within the numbers that the transportation engineer is
The
projecting.
majority of those parkings will be for the apartments, the 60 unit apartment building.
Well, you have 80 units of housing, so if you take 100, or 80 times 1.2 or 1.5 spaces per unit, that gets you to 120. We still have 60 some odd spaces serving the commercial use. And, you know, the projections that were done by our transportation engineer using the method that VHB requested, using the ITE manual, show that 150 some odd spaces would meet the needs of the combined uses on the site.
So one thing also that I wanted to mention, this came up sort of tangentially when you mentioned DPW, and I know earlier, I think the topic of sewers at least briefly came up. And I just wanted to provide an update, so since, there's been a couple of emails back and forth since last meeting. So we've engaged with Weston and Sampson now to actually do that sort of initial review of capacity and all of that. So our interim town administrator signed an agreement such that Weston and Sampson can go and do that work now. They're currently working on that. As soon as we hear back, as soon as we get a report back from them, of course, we'll share that with you. But that's in the works. You know, I didn't want to wait until tonight, you know, to sort of start the ball rolling on that. So I tried to get that rolling ahead of time. It looks like.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We were hoping you would do that.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
So that's moving along. We should be getting that, I think, feedback in the not too distant future. That's another.
It looks like they need some information from them.
Let me see, what does it say?
Developer we need to provide.
Oh, yeah, I think that was in your, so what I also provided after this letter was, so I sent Weston and Sampson a link to the town website where it has all the details about wastewater calculations. And I think that's what they were looking for. If they need more, they.
Just make sure that wasn't a whole.
They can
Is this
follow
what you're talking about? The water tabulations?
It was a comment, I think, that he had found in one of the emails.
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I could respond. We
please.
did provide that information. They were asking us what we were using as a credit for the existing uses. We
Okay.
did provide that information, so they have what they need.
Dave, do you have a question about the former building that was?
The VFW.
Yeah, VFW.
Because what came with us was the tabulation of water use and sewer generation at former uses. And it has like 235 West Boylston Street, Jake's, the end unit, the strip mall, nutrition, Smolansky's, and on Pierce Street, the old VFW A and B. I guess Sampson and Wesson wanted to know how much water and sewage was going through the calculations. So the daily average GPD was 1,505, and the daily average in the peak quarter GPD was 2,600. I don't understand what any of that means. I'm sure you know. But
Yes, Mr. Chair, those were the calculations I provided. So those are gallons per day of water usage. So we equate the sewage generated with water usage unless something's separately metered to go to irrigation.
Okay.
So these are numbers that are based on the water district's records, not what the DEP numbers would say they should be. So we're projecting our uses based on the DEP numbers, which are much higher. So it's generally a factor of, say, 2.5 to 3 times what the actual usages will be. But we can only take a credit for what has been metered. So we're projecting, say, 19,000 gallons per day of water usage or sewer generation. We can only credit that 2,000 gallons per day from the peak quarter, from combining all of the other peak uses that were on the site.
So there is a sewer hookup on Pierce Street.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And is it going to be like right in front of your building?
I would like to see, first of all, where the records show the existing connection is. So if we don't have to dig into Pierce Street, we would be happy making that connection, on the site. Same on Route 12. If we don't have to dig in Route 12, it's gonna be better for everybody. Because it's not only a construction cost, it's a permitting through Mass DOT, and it creates traffic for everybody when you're narrowed down to one lane. So our goal is to use the connections within the site,
Okay.
both for water and sewer.
And let me ask you this, so in your experience, the work now that Weston and Sampson has been asked to do, would you expect that as part of that report that some of those details might come back, or are they just focusing on the capacity?
So
right now?
I received, after requesting it, specific information from Public Works about the existing connections. I now have that information to know physically where they are.
Yep.
Weston and Sampson is looking at the capacity of the system,
Yeah.
The pump system, and the town's sort of allocation to the greater Upper Blackstone.
Okay.
is there capacity within the pump system, the force main, and your allotment to handle this additional, say, 17,000 gallons per day? That's the question at hand.
Excellent.
Right.
Go ahead.
What is the pumping system for this property? Is it near the opposite to the Walmart?
This site currently has gravity connections to the sewer. So where they go within the town, I'm not exactly sure, because I don't have those record plans from the town.
I was wondering, those things comes to the, opposite to the Walmart,
Yeah.
there is a big station.
Yeah, that's not, okay. Other questions from board members on either VHB's comments or comments from the petitioner?
Sounds like they
at
got
this time?
everything under control.
Okay.
Just, I guess the only thing now is waiting for the sewer, and I don't know if they need to get a hold of DPW to talk to them about stormwater, because I thought on the last, when we met the last time, there was a question about that they needed to talk to DPW about some kind of pipe and the dimension of a pipe. And when I talked to the DPW director, he didn't even have a copy of this. So I had Toby get him a copy of this. So I believe he has a copy of this now. So I don't know if he's gonna reach out to Patrick, or if Patrick needs to reach out to him, or what.
So you're talking about now to get the details of,
Something to do with the stormwater, to make sure that everything is,
okay. So, I mean, certainly part of that, it sounds like it will relate to, what we're getting from Westland and Sampson. But I expect, yeah, there's gonna be some follow-up questions there around where these connections are and how big these pipes are underground, all that.
or maybe, I don't know if Sampson and Wesson is gonna make a report directly to us, or if they're gonna make it to the sewer commissioners and the sewer commissioners. But
Might
me
go to the-
personally, I would like, when Sampson and Wesson makes their decision, I would like them to come to our meeting and talk to us, so that if we have any questions, we can ask them directly. Or if the petitioner has any questions, they can ask them directly, instead of have to, go Mickey Mousing around
Yeah,
and saying,
yeah.
oh, well, we have to go ask this person. At least they're here, they can answer the questions.
Yeah.
But that's totally up to you and how you wanna handle it.
Yeah, I mean-
But that would be my suggestion,
That would be
is
my-
to ask them to come to our meeting when they have all the information, and they're gonna make the presentation. Come to our meeting, make the presentation.
Yep, fair enough.
What about the other departments? Did we get any
Yes.
other department?
And that's what I have a question about is, okay, we got a response from the conservation? Did you get a copy of this?
Through the chair, no, I haven't seen that.
Okay, because they had some questions. They want to know more information on the retention of the water on the property, such as how and where this will take place. They would like to know what the effect will be on sheet water on the abutters. Will the petitioner file with the Conservation Commission or go directly to DCR or DEP? They would like to know where the actual snow storage will take place, not proposed storage. They would like to know where erosion controls will be placed and what type of erosion controls will be used. And they would like to know the plan for storage of construction materials.
I believe some of that was addressed in the prior hearings, and I believe VHB addressed some of those questions.
Okay.
Particularly with stormwater, VHB did a comprehensive review and had very detailed comments, which I believe Patrick addressed to their satisfaction.
That's correct.
So I think, the board has already addressed that. In terms of going to Concom, this 40B LRP process, we come here, we don't have to go there.
Okay.
And we only have the issue with the Gatesbrook proximity, and again, we're not in a flood area, and VHB has addressed some of that. We do need to get that clearance. In terms of runoff, that came up at the first hearing. Right now, there's really no control. Water runs off the property onto abutters, according to their comments at the first public hearing. And I was just by the site. It was after we had heavy rains, and there was lots of water there. So it'll be a net massive improvement to what the situation is now. The site will be level. It won't have a lot of those embankments where the water's running off onto neighbors now and into the street. And again, we haven't seen this, so I don't know if there's anything you want to address, erosion controls
We did provide erosion and sediment
Right.
control plans.
and snow
With
storage.
the application.
So he's basically, so Mr. Chase, who's the chair of the con, he's basically asking for you to contact him or email him so that, you know, you guys can discuss it. And if there's any, you know, if all of these questions have been answered and he's satisfied, then that'll be it. But, you know, I'd appreciate it if you could contact him, talk to him, then let us know at the next meeting that,
Provide copies of those.
because,
Didn't you say you already contacted?
So, no, we haven't talked to the
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought
commission at all. I think I was answering the applicant. We did review stormwater that they provided as part of the application. All the stormwater system design, et cetera. And we had comments, they've addressed them. There may be a couple of outstanding things, but it'll be addressed.
I think their main concern is because Gate Books is right there.
Understood, and I think they've acknowledged
So
that's the one issue they have to deal with.
I'm presuming that that's their main concern, and they wanna know where all this other water, the sheet water and everything is gonna go, and you know, where the snow is gonna go. So I would just suggest that you call them, talk to Mr. Chase, get everything resolved, and then come back to us at the next meeting and let us know, say, everything's all taken care of, okay? Thank you.
Through the chair, yes, we can do that.
Thank you. Other questions or comments with regard to Concom? I think that covers it. All right, so we've talked about fire issues, we've talked about the ongoing review with Weston and Sampson.
There is no septic, that's why the Board of Health, no comments.
I think that's right. On the property, yeah. Let's see. And I know, so you brought up earlier in the meeting, you brought up the request for certain waivers that you had mentioned before. I know we've talked about this in the past. This is, to your point, this is something that, yeah, I'd like to sort of, as a board, get our arms around sooner rather than later. I think up to and including also, there was a waiver request for the general fee as well. I mean, I'd like to sort of tackle that, maybe as early as the next meeting, maybe really start digging into some of these waiver requests and getting some clarity or certainty there. But of course, I think before doing that, it might be helpful and instructive, you know, to get sort of, you know, maybe one more round of comments back and forth, you know, from all the folks that we've talked to and talked about tonight. So I mean, to me, that sounds like maybe a reasonable plan forward. I guess I would ask Judy, I think you're online. I might ask you for just sort of a point of order on that as far as addressing some of the waiver requests and then some of the initial reviews from the town engineer.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest, Mr. Chair, that you ask your peer review consultants and your town staff if anybody has any concerns about specific waivers. Just as you're going to ask people, and you already have, for recommendations about conditions in case the board decides to approve this project, you're going to want, and you will benefit from, technical advice from your peer review consultants and your town staff as to what some conditions might be. And I would say the same goes for the waiver review. I mean, if people see something that they think might create a problem for the town, if you were to waive, to grant a waiver, it would be helpful to the board to hear that input. I'm also going through the waivers as well, and so, but what I'm looking for is more things like an overly broad waiver request. So, if the applicant has a duty to be clear about what they need waived, as opposed to just sort of a generic waiver of like rules and regulations or something. So I'm kind of focusing on that. But I think it would be very helpful to the board to know from your consultants whether there are any particular waivers that perhaps you either should consider not granting or approving with some conditions.
Okay. Yeah, and I know you mentioned some possible conditions going
Mr.
forward.
Chairman, if it would be helpful, I know you said you may want to talk about this next time, but
Yeah.
we've got a waiver section listed in our letter. If you'd like, we can just spend a couple
Yes.
minutes right now.
Yeah, that'd be
and
great.
go
I thought
through this.
so.
It'd probably be good to see if the board supports
Yeah,
the waiver
Yeah,
request or not. And Patrick, I don't have your letter, so if I leave something out, please let me know if I've left something out. So one of the waivers they've asked for.
Can you, which,
I'm sorry, yes, page 5 of our letter, dated today, does not have the word traffic in the title.
the big page?
The big one, the 19-page letter,
Okay.
page 5.
Yep.
At the bottom, we talk about waiver requests under section 3.6.c.2. They're looking for a waiver having to do with the drawing scale. We have no issue with that. It's acceptable to us, and we defer to you whether if the board feels that's acceptable. We see that all the time, that waiver request. That's nothing out of line. Under page 6, 3.6.d1, one of the waivers requested not including all of the water courses, water bodies, tree lines, significant trees, et cetera, blah, 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 basically survey type, existing survey issues. From our perspective, we feel the applicant has complied with this requirement, but they also have a waiver listed. This may be something you want to reconsider, Patrick. I don't think you need to request that anymore, but if you do, you certainly can. Again, it's nothing on a project of this magnitude, it's multiple acres, it's not out of line to grant a waiver for something like that.
If I could just say, Mr. Chair, we had requested a waiver of the entirety of section 3.6. So VHB has gone through and said, you don't meet, these
Yeah.
specific sections. This is really where we should
whole
focus the discussion about the waivers, not the overly broad question that Judy mentioned.
mhm.
If there are specific things we need to request waivers on, we'll enumerate them and have you vote on it in that way.
Okay,
But if there are any that are objectionable, like, certainly, let us know and we'll try to address them.
excellent.
But as Wayne said, we have addressed this one at this point.
So that actually, to Patrick's point, on the remainder of page 6, also has to do with a lot of items related to existing conditions plan, et cetera. On page 7, has to do with 100-year floodplain.
Yeah, so I provided a copy of the
Yep.
flood map showing you that there's no floodplain on the property, so I really can't show it on the site plan as far as the limits of the site that we're showing.
On page 7, subsection N and P have to do with existing curbing, paving, existing and proposed utilities, and as we kind of enumerated before, we do believe that Patrick needs some time to figure out exactly what he needs to do with sewer connections and any drainage that needs to happen. So that should, either he figures it out, or there needs to be a condition that he figure it out. That's kind of what we're saying in response to that. Section 5.2B to C, this has to do with parking spaces, only to the rear of the buildings. I believe, Patrick, you've requested a waiver from that to allow parking in the front of the buildings, correct?
Well, I think you've identified that as an area where we need to seek relief,
Okay,
if I'm not mistaken.
right, that's right. So we, this has to, I'm sorry.
This one, I think, is specific to the sidewalks, right?
It's specific to the sidewalks and the parking that we already talked about, so that's something that.
I think we've rearranged some of the parking where we can look at it again, but
Okay.
it may or may not be necessary to seek this relief.
All right, that's fine. And then the last one really has to do with the retaining walls, and it sounds like you said that everything's less than 6 feet, and you don't feel you need permission from the building commissioner, so.
Subject to confirmation.
Right.
Yes.
Is there anything again, I don't have your letter, is there anything that you were requesting a waiver from that I didn't touch on?
I don't believe so. We had in our application a list of the requirements, and it turns out as we work with VHB progressed, we needed less than we asked for, which is, I believe, where we are right now. And they were generally dimensional, de minimis sorts of things, not major use categories or
Yeah.
anything like that. And again, all within the purview of the zoning board. This is not another department. This
Yeah.
is the members here
Yeah.
that are the experts for the town.
Now, one question that I have that pertains to waivers is around, so for example, sort of the density of residential units for, say, whatever this is, a 5-acre lot. I mean, obviously, that's part of, you know, at least in some sense, I would understand that that's sort of part of the ask, because otherwise you wouldn't normally be able to build outside of sort of the LIP context. Is that fair?
More units.
I'm not sure that the zoning bylaw would restrict us in that regard, given the size of the site.
Okay,
So this project was initially proposed and floated out to the town as a conventional market rate development.
Yeah.
And after discussions with the town, our client decided to approach it from a different perspective, as an
Okay.
LIP, in cooperation with the town to meet its housing goals.
okay. I'm just, I
So,
mean,
you know, the waiver that's related to that, I did enumerate.
yeah, I
Should
do
be section
remember it.
3.2, the waiver to allow mixed-use buildings with commercial use on the ground floor and residential use on upper floors. So the bylaw does allow mixed-use buildings, but it doesn't specifically allow residential above commercial. So this was more of a clarification, you know, than a
There's not,
variance.
there's not a prohibition or a special permit or special site plan.
But under the building code, it gets you into a different building category. It just wasn't clear that the zoning and the building code were, you know, sort of parallel.
Okay,
That's why we had listed that as a request. And the other one was to allow more than one habitable building on a lot.
Yeah.
So if we were doing strictly residential, say single or two-family, you're only allowed to have one building on a lot.
okay.
So, Mr. Chair, could I just ask a question?
Please.
Do we actually have a current waiver list at this point? Because I'm sure waiver lists always do change. I mean, in fairness to the applicant, what comes in at the beginning, you know, does evolve.
Sure.
And so I just want to make sure before the board goes too far discussing waivers, do we have a current
Yeah,
actual waiver list?
yeah. Well, given this latest letter from VHB, which I think is helpful and gives, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
a few pages of these, and given, I think, what the petitioner had just informed us of, I wonder if that might actually, between now and then the next time we meet, if that might help things along, if you could provide sort of an updated waiver request list for us in view of, you know, some of these more recent changes and updates to the preliminary plan. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, if we could get the permission to eliminate the waivers that your peer review identified as not being necessary, to not have to formally request them or to have you acknowledge formally
Yep.
that they're not requested, because I don't want to get to a situation where we're at the end and that fell through the cracks, when obviously it's been thoroughly investigated.
Yes, I would say, I think that's a good idea. So what I would say is for this next round of waivers, just for clarity, what I would like to see is, because you're right, there are several of these that in this latest letter, VHB is saying, you know, that they don't believe a waiver is necessary for one reason or another. Could you, for this list, could you include those in the list, but just in parentheses or something, just say per the March 17th VHB letter, we don't feel this is no longer, we feel this is no longer necessary,
Well,
and just
so,
leave it that way.
Mr. Chair, the way I had approached it was I was waiving the entire section.
Yeah.
And now we've said, well, you comply with all these sections of the section, you really only need to narrow down your waiver
That's
request to these 6
Yes.
or 8 things.
Yeah.
Sure, we can do that. We'll do
Okay.
that before the next meeting.
Probably
That's
more
exactly
beneficial.
what we want to see. That's what we want to
Excellent,
see.
yeah, I think that's, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine, I didn't know who was talking, I
Okay.
realized it was Judy. I think that would be beneficial for the board to not have to vote any more waivers than necessary. And I think that's where you guys are
Yeah,
coming from.
exactly.
That's how I'm reading the
Yeah,
record, so.
yeah,
Right.
exactly, just to know when we compare lists, which ones sort of came off the list and where that is, where that's made clear in your comments and
Yeah,
your review.
Mr. Chair, this is part of the record, VHB's findings are gonna be part of the record, so that we can rely on those as.
Yeah, this is gonna be, I think, part of the file here for this hearing.
It's also pretty common in the decision to, in your discussing the procedural history, to be able to acknowledge that there were some waivers requested that were no longer needed as a result of testimony at the hearing. So I think there's a number of ways that can be addressed to give comfort to the applicant as well as the board.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's helpful. That way, at least, as I said, there's some documentation behind why some waivers may have sort of fallen off the list and why they no longer need to be requested, why we don't need to vote on them going forward. So I think that makes good sense. Thank you. Questions from the board on that? Or anything else? I did have one other thing that I wanted to do. That it's not a substantive issue, but it's something that the board needs to vote on. It's just housekeeping matters. But before we get to that, I don't know if any board members have further either comments or questions for either the petitioner or the town engineer at this time.
No.
Nothing?
No.
Okay. Nothing from John either? All right, so that's great. So, so let's get to this matter here. So I did want to take a couple of votes, because I know we do have a couple of outstanding invoices for town engineer services. I want to get those voted on.
Yep.
And hopefully approved tonight, so that we can pay those invoices in short order. So the first one that I wanted to mention, again, that I do want to vote on the record, we will do a voice vote, since this is a hybrid hearing. But the first one was for an invoice from VHB. It's dated January 29th, 2025. And it's for the engineering and review services that they've been working through. And so for that invoice, the amount was $6,827.50.
So moved.
So we have a motion to
Grant it.
approve payment. Okay.
Second.
We have a second, thank you, from Nate. We will do a voice vote then if there's no comments on the invoice. Maybe I'll ask, Raj, would you vote first?
Whether we are taking vote on this?
The town, the treasurer asked that we vote on these before.
Normally, we get the bills and then somebody signs the bill.
Yeah, I received an email saying, I think it's because the funds are held in escrow. There are different rules that apply, so we need to
It's the
take
first time
a
we were
vote.
voting on it, right?
I-
We never seen it.
If the treasurer asks the chairman.
Yeah, we never vote on any of those things.
Yeah, I've never done one of these
So,
before either.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Do you have any misgivings?
No, I'm a little bit surprised why we are voting on this.
Yeah.
Because they did the work.
Yep.
And this is one of those things, the developer has to pay for it.
Yep.
And VHP bill it, and
Yep.
we normally, we get the bill, someone signs it.
Yeah.
And then we pay the bill, that's it.
Yeah.
What hurts if you vote on it?
So why do you want to bring in another?
Well, no, I'm saying if the chair, I'm sorry, the
Anyway,
treasurer.
I'm fine with that, voting is fine with that.
Yeah.
But I just want to know, why we are voting on it.
It may be
It's
because,
not like, something we need to vote on it.
it may be because of the kind of account that the money is being held in under law.
I do like
I think
to
it's
know.
called the
Anyway,
53G.
For the time being,
account.
I will say yes,
Okay.
but I do like to know why we are.
Yeah, maybe in the meantime, after this meeting, I can try and dig
Thank you.
into that some more.
My vote is yes.
Okay.
We
so-
do need to pay for Wayne.
Yes, we do, absolutely. So your vote is yes, Nate?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
your vote is a yes? My vote is a yes. John, what's your vote?
Yes.
Okay, so payment is approved for the first invoice dated January 29th, 2025. Now we have a second invoice dated February 26th, 2025, for the amount of $3,724. And by the way, just in case anybody asks, I've confirmed that we have more than enough money in the escrow account to fully cover these charges, so that's not an issue at
And
all.
who's this for?
Same,
I move to approve the amount for February
February 26th.
26th.
Excellent, so we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any comments on this one? Okay, hearing none, Raj, your vote?
Yes.
Nate?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm the yes vote, and John, your vote?
Wake
John,
up.
pay for the bill.
All right, I heard a yes. All right, so Toby, both of those votes are 5-0 to vote to pay for those, so I will reach out to the town treasurer tomorrow and get that moving. I'll also try and find more details as to why the
Yeah,
process is a
yeah, I
little
was
bit different
thinking it,
than in the past.
Mr.
Any
Chair?
votes?
And if you need it on the record, it's our money, so
Yeah.
we don't object you paying VHB.
That's,
Excellent job.
that's good, that's good.
Mr.
See the
Chair?
transparency that's going on here tonight?
Chris?
Usually
Yes.
what I've seen in other towns is if the board takes a vote to authorize the chair to approve and process invoices, that is sufficient. So you may want to consider taking
That's a
that
good idea.
vote and
Yep.
then tell the treasurer, after the fact, we did this, is this okay? And if the treasurer still wants a vote on every invoice, that's a local call, it's not
Yep.
typical, but it may be what West Boylston does.
Okay. And so Judy, if I'm hearing you correctly, do you want us to take another vote to authorize one of us to actually sign the bill?
I'm
Or-
saying that typically what I see is the board votes early on to
Yeah,
authorize the chair to review and approve and process invoices.
okay,
So the invoices don't have to come up to the full board.
okay,
And I'm just suggesting you may want to take a vote like that and then tell the treasurer, our board has authorized me to do this. I've got it on the record. Is that sufficient? And if
okay,
it is, then you don't have to bring any more invoices to the board. And if the treasurer still wants a vote on every one, well, that's
Yeah.
a local call.
Yeah,
That's a local
okay.
thing. All right?
I
So-
think let's find out why we are voting on it.
okay.
Because, at this time, Toby, how many signatures you need at this time for other bills? Only one signature, right?
Just one, yeah.
Anyone.
can
So
sign.
we already voted on it.
Yep.
Any one of the member can sign it
Yep.
for the bills.
Mhm.
So we don't have to vote on another vote for this. So let's find out why we are voting on it.
Okay,
That's about it.
fair enough.
So,
I will ask.
Oh, and Chris, what were the amounts again?
So the first one, January 29th, 2025, 6,827 and 50 cents.
Okay.
Second one, February 26th, 3,724.
Okay, thanks.
Okay? Excellent. Thank you for that. Any other questions from board members before we open it up to any public comment?
No.
Okay. That being the case then, so what we'll do is, I will see if anybody from the public wants to make any comments or any questions at this time. What I would ask is that any comments or questions be addressed to the board through me directly. But with that, please state your name and your address, and then you may make your comments or question. Go ahead.
Dave Toppin, 160 West Boylston Street, and I'm here to object to this project happening. And I hope that three of you are brave enough to stop this and save the mess that it would make in our town. The first time I've heard 1,600 additional trips was today, and maybe it was said before, maybe I missed it. But, I mean, just drive down West Boylston Street on a Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock and think about what 1,600 more trips per day would mean. It would be absolute insanity. We would be sitting in traffic for 3 light cycles to get through that light at Woodland Street. I think it took me 2 this past Saturday. The center of town there cannot handle this kind of traffic. I mean, again, I would not object to some kind of commercial development of the property, but putting 80 units in with another 125 cars that are gonna make 1,600 trips a day, according to their estimates, which may or may not be accurate. I just don't think that destroy our towns, fight the tyrants in Boston. And I have sent public records requests for all of your oaths of office that are on the board. And I know Raj does not have one as a selectman. And you really shouldn't be doing what you're doing without a signed and filed oath of office. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions from the public? Yes, please state your name and your address.
John Given on Pierce Street. I'm on the other side of this project. I too am opposed to this, not the commercial development or the retail or whatever goes in there. I'm speaking about the housing portion. I first asked this at the first public hearing. I never got a complete answer. By what the law says, have we met the law's mandate regarding land? 1.5%, and, you know, it's a chapter 40B, section 20, paragraph 4. Have we met it by what the law says?
Yeah, so we talked about this at the first hearing, I think,
Yeah.
when,
That conversation kind of went back and forth
yeah,
for a while.
I believe there was a member of the Affordable Housing Trust
Mark
here.
Frieden was-
Mark was here.
He said that's keep on changing. So earlier
Well, it changed.
earlier they were saying, you know,
So when did the law?
the calculation of the, calculation of the land area keep on changing. So for an example, yeah, I have mentioned to you earlier, what is that, the housing there, Maple Street,
Oh,
Orchard Knoll.
yeah,
So earlier, the calculation was the entire area is calculated as the area. What I came to know is, now, it's only the buildings, not the entire area is calculated. So my understanding is, you know, it's keep on fluid, changing.
That's not the law. That's just some whim that these unelected bureaucrats that you've never met, they couldn't even find this town on a map, deciding what we should do. We've met the law. Just cite the law. Anybody here can look up the law and cite it. It has nothing to do with area of any building. It's the acreage, 1.5% of the acreage that's zoned for residential, commercial, and industrial. And it's simple. Any 8-year-old can understand this. So it seems like you would rather ignore the law and appease unelected bureaucrats to put in a housing project that we do not need and would be terrible for this town. I just assume my taxes will go up, my sewer bill will go up, my water bill will go up, traffic will increase in my street. So I'm the one that lives closest to this project. Anybody here, tell me why I should support this project. How is it good for me? And the neighborhood. And the town. And down Route 12 and at the town at large. If you can, why are you accepting this?
I mean, this board has a certain purview, a certain legal responsibility.
I understand that.
And what we're trying to do is to meet that responsibility for the town here.
Yeah.
One of the-
Chapter 40B,
so-
section 20, paragraph.
Well, one of the aspects of this process is, as, again, dictated by the state, to your point, I mean, like it or not, we have to follow
Not the
the
legislature,
procedures that they
bureaucrats.
put in place. But my point is that, and I know we talked about this in earlier sections, was that there was, as part of this process, there is a certain time within which, if this board is going to deny on this basis, that we have to do that by. That deadline has since passed. So we no longer have the option, in my
You
view.
never said that at the previous meeting.
We did.
So when was the starting date and the ending date?
We did
Because
talk
you go
about
through
that
all
at
the other
previous
40B
meetings.
projects, including that crap across the street.
You can look at the minutes if you'd like, but this was mentioned at those earlier sessions. But again, I mean, I don't want to get too bogged down on it because I feel like
Well,
for
this
this
is the issue.
issue,
Where
It's
parking
moot.
spaces go, and 1,600 trips here, and bushes and fire met our 40B requirement. So there's no reason to go on any further. We can shut down this project and save this town a lot of misery and headaches.
Well,
You wouldn't support this if you lived on Pierce Street or Bunker Hill or Brandywine or Trenton or Worcester Street or Woodland. Or West Boylston Street. Yeah, down by where he lives. You simply wouldn't.
Again, I mean, the responsibility that this board has is to follow the laws and.
That's what I'm trying to have you do, follow the law. You're
Right.
following, whatever whims and whatever floats into the head of these unelected bureaucrats that none of you have ever met.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would disagree, or not sure I would agree with that statement,
So you
but
have met these unelected bureaucrats, and that made up these laws. Who came up with these new guidelines?
those are all state guidelines.
Who made them?
I think this is beyond the scope of what this board
this is the
is
point.
addressing here tonight. We're talking about, we're not talking about state law.
No legislature did.
We're not talking about affordable housing law into the state. We're talking
So
about this
project
particular
has nothing to
petition
do with
before us.
40B then.
This is a particular application that has been submitted to this board. And we're dealing with this particular application in accordance with local and state law. That's what
You're
we're
not
doing
following
here
the law.
tonight, so. Any other questions or
Does
comments?
this fall under 40B or any other version of 40B, like quote-unquote lit?
As far as I understand, this is a,
Okay, so these 20 affordable units, and affordable, that's a euphemism for subsidized. Are these 20 affordable units falling under what law? Is it 40B?
it certainly relates to 40B.
Well, then
and
it's a 40B. If it looks like a duck, or quacks like a duck, does anything like a duck, it's a duck. And the same thing with 40B.
I don't think anybody's denying that.
You're certainly not denying this. You are denying the project. Like he said, like I've explained, this is going to be horrible for the town. You want to put in retail and commercial, that's fine. That's what it was zoned for. That's what the 2005 master plan said. If we're going to put in sewers, it would help put in businesses all along Route 12. It said nothing about housing. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Is there anybody online, members of the public, who would like to make any comments at this time? Okay, hearing none. Any other comments or questions from the board?
So towards that land area
Yeah.
and the number of units, where do we get that definitive answer? Can we get a definitive answer on that? Or do we need to go to the state and find out the definitive answer? So I do know that, affordable housing is the one doing this kind of
Yeah.
land calculation. But, so this project, when it came to the board, my understanding is, we do need 40B projects for this town.
Yeah.
So that's the reason, this was given as a LIP project.
Yeah.
So, but since Jay raised this question,
Mhm.
so can we able to get definitive answer, or who can able to tell us, hey, we are under the limit, or we are over the limit?
Yeah, so I don't know, first of all, I don't know that we can get a definitive answer.
When do you know?
Because it's a legal
Because
issue.
you're changing the rules.
When?
I'm not sure who monitors that in town. There is definitely we've helped other communities with this. There's a calculation that needs to be run
Yeah.
to determine whether you guys are over or under, what you're required to have.
Right.
According to the
Right.
state laws.
Right.
I don't know this town's status, unfortunately.
Yeah,
So we
Well-
could reach out to the affordable housing also, right? On the other day, Mark was very clear, and he said, we are under the limit.
yes.
But
I
the only
remember
thing
that.
is, yes, like Jay said, is it the law, or is it the, what is the thing he says?
Suggestions.
Suggestion or, so those things. Maybe we'll reach out to the affordable housing too.
Still, like, I'm happy to reach out to affordable housing and get
Yeah.
some more detail on that,
So
but,
Not only this, another project is also, it's a friendly 40B, a LIP project. That project is also allowed because of the reason that we are under the limit. We are not over the limit.
Yeah.
If it is over the limit,
but again, I think it bears repeating. No matter what that determination ultimately comes to,
yeah, but
for
that.
purposes, just let me finish. For purposes of this specific petition that's before us, it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah,
We've
but-
already passed that deadline, we've
Yeah,
already
but
crossed that
My
bridge.
vote could be changing.
What's that?
My vote will be changing. If it is if it is over the limit, even now, my vote will be changing, right? Any member of the board
No,
will
so-
will change it too.
Judy, can you speak to the deadline there that I was referring
Yes.
to that passed about a month or two ago? That
Yes.
if this board were going to refuse this project on that basis, we had to do so within,
Yeah, we're
Whatever it
15
was,
days
30
of
days.
opening the hearing. And you would have to provide written notice to the proponent that you were asserting that you have the right to turn down the project because the town believes it's over the 1.5% general land area minimum. The applicant then has the right, under the rules, to appeal that determination, which is why you have to provide them written notice within 15 days. So, and when you make that determination and you give it to the applicant, you also have to CC the carbon copy, the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. The applicant can appeal your determination, in which case EOHLC gets involved and they review the basis on which you've made that determination. And they have 30 days to do that. And if they decide that the applicant is correct and you're incorrect, you have the right to then pursue what's called an interlocutory appeal to the Housing Appeals Committee, or you can accept EOHLC's determination. If EOHLC decides that the town is correct and your 1.5% calculation will hold, then they would make that determination as well. So back to what Wayne said, I mean, there are companies that have done this analysis for communities. But you are correct, Mr. Chair, that the time to make that assertion has passed. That needed to happen within 15 days, which means you would have needed the analysis in hand at that point.
which,
So the board did discuss all this at the first hearing. I
Yes.
remember it quite well.
Yeah, we did, you
yes,
did.
we did.
we did.
You dropped the ball, you should have, that would be a way, reject them, and that would be a way to find out if you got the 1.5%.
So with respect, we did look into that issue, and the feedback that we received from
From
Affordable
one
Housing
guy.
Trust, who, it's a full board, they are the subject matter experts. We took them, giving their expertise and the expertise that they had reached out for, that they did not feel that in this situation, the town had met that standard.
They did not
I
feel.
remember
but
we talked about it, so.
They did not feel. but
That's
they
my
weren't sure.
characterization. They came to a conclusion of that. That's,
Based on their feeling.
that's all that I'm saying. No, it was more than a feeling. They had reached out, my understanding was they had reached out to at least one expert, if not more, to make that
I
determination.
don't
So.
recall him saying that.
If I could, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just to back up, although we are past, I believe you're correct.
Yeah.
Period to question that. When we first proposed this project, as a matter of right, without any 40B as market rate housing, which the majority of it is, we were asked, because the town administrator at the time did not believe that you met the affordability requirement,
The common lesbian.
to apply as, with the town for a friendly 40B, which we agreed to do. We had an informational hearing before the select board and an informational hearing before the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, where all of this was discussed by them,
Mhm.
not us. And we were voted to proceed, so then we went to a hearing, got approval from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, went back to the select board and got unanimous approvals at every level. We had several public hearings before we came here. Then it went to the state, to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. They approved it, presumably with this criteria in mind, and then it went back to the town, and here we are.
Mhm.
So this is not something that someone pulled out of the air. It's not something we thought of. We were asked to do this, and we agreed. We own property in the town, we do business in the town, we want to invest more in the town. And here we are, and I've heard the word subsidized used. I'd like to know where the subsidy is, because we're not getting any. The only people paying for this project is us. And we're not getting any governmental or any other subsidy from any other party. It's my partners and I, it's our money. No government funding whatsoever is gone into this, and I just wanted that to be clear.
Mhm. Thank you. Other questions, comments from the board? Okay. So thank you for that clarity, Judy. I think that was helpful.
I have a quick follow-up.
Sure, go ahead.
Two and then through you. So then why are you proposing 20 quote-unquote affordable units if you don't need to?
I mean, if I heard him correctly, I think it was, the town had asked him to do that in order to put the town in a better position vis-à-vis that state standard. Is that fair?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
So you'd be losing money on these affordable units?
Well, through the chair, we would be, they're set at 80% of the AMI, average median income, which in our model is we generally provide workforce-type housing. So it wouldn't be much less than the market rate we would be charging. And so for us, yes, we would make less money, yes, conceivably.
Mr. Chair, could I add, the town does not get credit only for the 20 units because it's a rental community. The town gets credit of the 80 units toward its requirement to have 10%.
Yep.
This is part of your town's housing, housing production plan,
Yeah.
was to focus on projects like this, where you could get more credit than you normally would get.
Yeah, and my recollection is that was part of the motivation for the board, or for the town coming and asking for these subsidized units.
Yeah,
as I
Mr. Chair,
understand
that
it.
was clearly part of the discussions, that when they approached us to do it, they indicated that this was the type of project they were looking for,
Okay,
that the master plan, the housing plan, the zoning ordinance,
Yep.
all looks for this. This is exactly the area where this type of project was supposed to go.
okay.
And also, when we had the meeting at the senior center, the
Right.
combined meeting on all the Parks Commission, Board of Health, and Planning Board, whatnot. So majority of the people, they did supported this project because it's in Route 12. So if you don't put it in Route 12, where else we can put the this kind of project? So there was another project which is 18 Malden Street that was opposed, heavily opposed, and then they did pull back. So I'm not sure.
Mhm.
And in some of the other discussions that we had, were that the area is characterized by mixed use. There's commercial and then there's multifamily right next to it. Around Walmart, there are apartment buildings. On Pier Street, there are apartment buildings. Across the street, behind Santander Bank, there is an apartment building. I mean, they're all in close proximity, exactly this type of use. And so it's
How
our
many units
intention that it's
total?
appropriate for the area.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
The nice thing about this project, of course, some people don't wanna hear this, the nice thing about this project is even though 20 units are affordable, all 80 units will go on the SHI, the Subsidized Housing Inventory List, okay? The Subsidized Housing Inventory List consists of two things, a numerator and a denominator. The numerator is the number of units that are on the SHI. The denominator is the number of year-round houses that is accumulated at the end of every 10 years at the end of the census. Right now, we have 227 units on the SHI, and the denominator is 3,031. So right now, our percentage is 7.7%. 7.78, I think it is. These 80 units, because it'll go on the SHI as soon as the comprehensive permit, will put us at a little over 10%, almost 11%. Which means that'll put us into safe harbor, which means that we don't have to approve another 40B project.
Unless if they change it. Unless if they
But
change the rule.
we're safe for the next 10, am I correct? We're safe for the next 10 years, Judy?
No, Judy cannot say that too, because the governor can change it
Because
at any time.
this will only change every 10 years
So,
during the,
let's just, under, the denominator is set by statute. It's not, the governor, I don't care who they want to do, but the denominator does not change. Because it's in the statute that the denominator is based on the decennial census. So you don't have to worry about that. Now, it will change in 2030, but it won't change until then. What will change is the number of units that are added to the inventory, which are then divided, by that number to get to the percentage that you need. So if this puts you over 10%, it's going to keep you over 10% until at least 2030, if not beyond.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Welcome.
So if there's no other comments from online, then what I'll do is want to think about a date to continue this hearing, which gives all parties involved enough time to sort of work back and forth
well,
on that.
how much time will the engineers need to, how much time will the petitioner need to get all the things that they need to do? And if Mr. Amico needs to get anything done, how much time is he gonna
Yeah.
need? You know, and hopefully, they'll get all the stuff to us at least a week before the meeting.
Yeah, I do like to see this.
That's one of my pet
Yeah.
peeves.
I agree.
So I don't know how long, Mr. Healy, how long do you think you're gonna need to get what you need to get? Are we looking at another 4 or 5 weeks?
And then the only other thing I'll add before Mr. Healy answers is, so I know that we opened this hearing in early December.
Yeah.
And there's supposed to be, I think, after 180 days, I think we need approval from the petitioner in order to keep continuing it. So that 180 days ends somewhere around early June, I'm gonna say. So we are now obviously in mid-March. So, we still have time for hopefully at least another meeting or two between now and then, but I want to be cognizant of that,
Right.
that
Thank you.
deadline as well. Thank you
Yes.
for that, Judy. So again, not to say that we can't go over that with sort of approval of the petitioner, but I'm sure you want to get to the end, which, as quickly as you can. I think the board does too. Nevertheless, we've got to make sure all the Ts are crossed, Is are dotted, but in order to get there. So with that, just sort of extra context, I don't know if, Mr. Healy, if you, in view of what we talked about tonight and in view of maybe the bolus of work that implies. Now, I know you're obviously going to also have to have conversations with the fire chief, as we talked about, and maybe others as well in town. So I want to make sure that you have time to have those communications and get the information that you need to make sort of the next best step forward in this process. But maybe with that, I'll offer you, or allow you to suggest what you're thinking.
Mr. Chair, you mentioned earlier the review by Weston and Sampson. Do you
Yes.
have a delivery date?
They did not mention a delivery date. The sense that I got was, it didn't seem like that was a particularly long process. All I know is he said he was working on that and he would get back to me. I mean, maybe what I could do in the interim is try and get an estimate from him in the short term, but of course that doesn't help us right now.
And the other third party was DPW,
Yes.
that we don't have control over
Yeah,
their
yeah.
response time.
Fair enough.
And please contact Comcom. Good luck to them.
Yeah, Bill's easy to reach. I don't have a
Okay,
problem.
I know
with
you
that.
know Bill.
Thank you.
And the other things with the state, which is post-ZBA, presumably presuming you approve us, if you approve us, that's all state stuff.
DOT and Mass EPA and all that,
And you
yeah.
can condition, well, you don't need to condition your approvals because we can't build it without
Yeah.
your approval.
Yeah.
And any other, as Mr. Rico suggested, there's certain things you can condition. If, again, we're gonna get built, we still need to get building permits, so
Yeah.
there's a long list of variables that we need to satisfy the town on
Mhm.
post ZBA.
Mr. Healy, just out of curiosity, because there's so many openings, you know, cuts in the, you know, as far as cuts in the road to get into those spaces, and you said that you have to go through Mass DOT, do they give you a certain specific amount of numbers? Or do you just tell them, like, where your building is gonna be, and tell them what you're doing, and they'll say, okay, you can only have 2 cuts here, 2 cuts there? I'm just curious on how that works, because I'm thinking, since it's already wide open and people just go wherever they want, I figured that would just apply to you, and you just do whatever you need to do. No?
No, through the chair, unfortunately, it doesn't work
Okay,
that way
all right.
today in the environment that we're working in. So we would put forth our proposed plans as approved by the town
Okay,
and file with Mass DOT. They would look at the width of the driveway, the turning radius for vehicles, the separation, site distance issues, pedestrian accommodations, and signage and speed limit and all those things.
okay.
We're proposing to eliminate a number of curb cuts, so this should be, you know, a beneficial project both for the town and for Mass DOT. So I think they would look at it favorably, but you never know.
Yeah.
And at that same time, that's when you'd tell them about sidewalks and where you want to do it.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay,
That would be part of our plan that we show to
Okay.
Mass DOT.
And through the chair, our past projects where we're limiting access to ingress and egress in a site where there was no limit, as there is there now, that's generally viewed favorably, and we have not had problems in those other developments with state approvals.
okay.
Mr. Chair and members of the board, from my experience and Pat's experience with DOT, this is a fairly straightforward project. It's gonna be advantageous to Mass DOT and the town to eliminate all these curb cuts. DOT typically allows 2 curb cuts per site. They're asking for 2 curb cuts. My thoughts are the only discussion points are gonna be the curb radiuses, the site distance, and the sidewalk and understanding. There'll be discussions about, you know, the abutting property and the fact that you don't control that and so forth, but they also understand that they can't force you to do something on a piece of property that you don't control. So it's fairly straightforward, but I think that they'll view this as a positive project from my
Okay.
experience with them.
And Mr. Chair, if I would add, Ms. Barrett suggested you take a comprehensive vote for approving for the future invoices. I don't think you all did that yet.
No, I think Raj suggested not to do that,
Yeah.
Okay.
to talk to the treasurer, yeah.
I do like to know why.
If I would guess, past experience.
We'll figure it out with the town account.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And then just a date, right? I think we're
Oh,
waiting
for
on.
our next
on a
Just
next-
a date.
I think we're waiting on maybe a date that you
No, I
know.
was just looking at my other commitments, so I'm probably 2 weeks out from working on this.
Yep.
And then another week to turn it around. I know Wayne wants some time to look at it before the meeting. Could we possibly go 5 weeks from tonight?
The 14th?
No, the following week, sir?
14th or the 21st?
The 21st,
21st?
no, April?
21st of April?
When is, Patriots Day?
14th,
Which is
isn't it?
probably,
No,
that's
good-
the 21st.
Good question.
It is the
Yes,
21st?
It is the 21st.
Okay, so the
State
14th or
holiday.
the 28th? Your choice.
Probably the
Does it
28th.
Flip a
need to be a
coin.
Monday night?
Huh?
Sorry,
Does it
Judy?
need to be I'm sorry, does it need to be a Monday night? I actually thought you were meeting on Tuesdays and we made it tonight
Oh,
for
we
my
made an
sake.
exception for,
I think it did for my sake, because I had a meeting
Monday's good.
tomorrow night.
yeah. Monday actually might be better for, is Monday problematic for folks on the board? Or is-
Whenever you need me.
Okay. John,
It
I
might
don't
be-
know if there's a particular day of the week that works better for you. I can make honestly Monday or Tuesday work. What about you, Judy? What is generally easier for you?
You know, it varies from week to week, but it so happens, I'm sorry to say this, but it's getting to be town meeting season.
Yeah,
So actually, the 14th, I could not help you out. On the 15th, I could.
No, but I
So
think
Monday
I
night's
think
bad.
22nd.
Yeah, I think he needed it past that. He was looking at 21, but he can't do 21, so he has to do,
I'm sorry.
that's all right, yeah. So I think,
maybe April 22nd, which is a
I could,
Tuesday.
that is open for me.
That's open, Tuesday, April
Yes, sir.
22nd.
Yes, sir, it is.
Board members?
What?
April 22nd, Tuesday, does that seem to
Whatever.
work for folks?
Yeah, that's
be
fine
here.
with me.
I'm not getting a mean look from John, so I think, yep, I get thumbs up there for him. How about the petitioner? Does that work for you as well, Tuesday, April 22nd?
Mr. Patrick,
Yes.
and VHB?
Yeah, I guess I would just ask, just so I don't have to do what I
Yeah.
did today to the board.
Yeah.
If we could get at least something 2 weeks ahead of time, so I can get it programmed, reviewed, and get something to a board.
So that would
Maybe
be at the
on
8th?
Friday, so they can review it on the weekend rather than trying to
Thank
do
you.
it on Monday.
Appreciate it.
22nd is
Mr.
fine, to answer your question, Chris,
Okay.
so.
Excellent.
Mr. Chair, could I ask permission
Yes,
to
go ahead.
perhaps start to work on a draft set of conditions in case the board decides that you want to approve the project? You could have at least some draft conditions to discuss at your next meeting so that, you know, the applicant would have an opportunity to weigh in on them. The public could comment on them, but you would at least have some working conditions. And I'm asking because I may need to run some of this by your peer review consultant before the next meeting, so just in the interest of also keeping an eye on that 180-day deadline, if you would like me to, I could start working on some draft conditions.
Yeah, I think as the town engineer mentioned, I know in some of his materials, sort of are headed in that direction. And so in order to be prepared and to use our time as judiciously as possible, it probably makes sense. So
Okay.
I would be in favor of that.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, there's certainly no prejudice here one way or the other, but we're just trying to be prepared.
Are you available? That's a school vacation week.
Yes, I'm available.
Anything to get out of the house. Just kidding, Chris, just kidding.
Not a problem at all. All right, so if that's the case, then I will entertain a motion to continue the hearing to Tuesday, April 22nd at 7 PM.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second, thank you very much. Let's do a voice vote to continue this hearing to Tuesday, April 22nd at 7 PM.
Aye.
Raj, your vote?
Aye.
Yes. 2 yeses, 3 yeses, yes from me, and John, your vote as well?
Yes.
Excellent,
He's up there
5-0. So the hearing is continued to Tuesday, April 22nd at 7 o'clock. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. Thank you for furthering the conversation, and we will continue. Thank you very much. Okay, we do have next on the agenda.
Minutes.
We have a couple of sets of minutes that if we could.
Do we need John?
Yeah, John can stay on and just, this won't take long. This won't take long. So we have the minutes of December 9th, 2024. I reviewed them. I'm sure each of the members of the board has done their diligence as well there. So I have no amendments to the December 9th, 2024.
I move to
minutes.
approve the minutes of December 9th, 2024 as written.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second from Raj. Okay. We'll do a voice vote then to approve the December 9th minutes. Raj, your vote?
Yes.
Nate?
yes.
Yes.
Yes for me,
Yeah.
and John?
Yes.
Okay, 5-0, those minutes are approved. Now, also, what about the January 16th?
Make a motion to approve the January 16, 2025 minutes as written.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Any comment? Hearing none. Raj, your vote?
Yes.
Nate?
Yes.
Yes to me, for me, and John, you as well?
Yes.
Okay, 5-0 there, so the January 16 minutes are approved. One note I'll make that we have no new petitions that have come in, and so we do not need to hold this Thursday's normal scheduled ZBA meeting on March 20th, so that meeting will be, will, in all likelihood, will be canceled. But we will still keep the next regular meeting on the third Thursday in April.
Toby, when is Passover?
April 12th.
April 12th, okay.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Okay.
Second,
We have a motion, we have a second. Hearing no comment. Raj, your vote? Nate?
yes.
Yes for me. John, your vote?
Yes.
Okay, 5-0, we are adjourned.